Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This has been a very important debate, and tonight's vote will be one of the most significant votes this House will ever take. And I want to thank all of those that have spoken in the debate today, and indeed all of those that spoke in the debate on previous occasions. And Mr. Speaker, as we go to vote, I also want to put on record my thanks to the civil service and the UK negotiating team. They are dedicated, committed, and have worked tirelessly for the past 2 years. They deserve our thanks. Too often they have received wholly unwanted criticism with no right of reply. The verdict that this House delivers on the deal is not a verdict on their efforts, but on the mistakes and political decisions taken by the government. And so I record my thanks, our thanks to them for the work that they have done. Mr. Speaker, the mood in the debate today has been lively at times, but also sombre. Members have clearly been contemplating what is likely to happen tonight. The theme has been clear and focused on what the Prime Minister said she could deliver, namely legally binding changes to the backstop. And as has been said many times in this debate, on the 12th of February, the Prime Minister outlined her 3 options for achieving those legally binding changes to the backstop. Either a legally binding time limit, or a legally binding unilateral exit clause, or thirdly, the ideas put forward by the Alternative Arrangements Working Group. Those commitments, those promises have been repeated many times by the Prime Minister and by other Cabinet Ministers, so much so, Mr. Speaker, that for many members of this House, not least members opposite, this has become a matter of trust. These were promises made by the Prime Minister to them, to Parliament, and to the country. I have repeatedly raised the question of expectations. I've repeatedly raised the concern that the Prime Minister was raising expectations that she could not fulfil. And when I said that last week and the week before, members opposite challenged me that I wasn't optimistic enough when I said I don't think there are going to be legally binding changes. It's now obvious that the expectations, having been raised, have not been fulfilled and the promises have not been kept. Amongst the problems for the Prime Minister and for the government has been that they've been living day to day, week to week, avoiding defeat today by promising something tomorrow. That's what happened on the 10th of December when the vote was pulled. Avoiding defeat, promising assurances on the backstop. It's what happened on the 29th of January when the government voted for the so-called Brady Amendment, requiring that the backstop be replaced. It happened on the 12th of February when that promise was made about legally binding changes. And it happened 2 weeks ago when, facing possible defeat on a crucial moment and motion 2 weeks ago, the promise was made that we'd have the meaningful vote today, a vote on no deal tomorrow, and a vote on extension the day after. They were all promises made to avoid defeat today, a promise for tomorrow. But as tonight's vote is likely to show, today has caught up with tomorrow. There can be no more buying time. I appreciate in the last 24 hours the Prime Minister has valiantly tried to argue that she's delivered on her promises, that there are significant changes. But that claim has been tested in argument in this House. There was always the right to suspend the backstop under the Withdrawal Act if the arbitration panel found a breach of bad faith, a temporary right to suspend. That was not new. It's been there since the 25th of November. There was always the commitment that the backstop would not have to be replicated. That was there from the 14th of January in the letter from Presidents Tusk and Juncker. And the announcement that the letter is legally binding was made last night, but the Prime Minister on the 14th of January made it clear that the letters had legal force back then for the first vote. Though legal force, legal binding, dancing on the head of a pin, but that's the difference. That's the only difference. That claim has been tested in this debate, and the Attorney General delivered his opinion earlier. The key conclusion of paragraph 19 of his advice being that there is no internationally lawful means of exiting the backstop saved by the agreement. He could not have been clearer. The Attorney General made much play of the difference between political and legal issues, but the problem for the Prime Minister is that she promised legal changes. A Father of the House challenged the Leader of the Opposition on the question of the backstop, and rightly so, and I make it clear we've always accepted the need for a backstop. Nobody likes the backstop, but it is inevitable. But as the letter from President Tusk and President Juncker makes clear, the withdrawal agreement and political agreement are part of the same negotiated package. I will give way.
Very grateful, but he did refer to me. But what I put to the Leader of the Opposition was that the only things we're settling today with this vote is the deal we've got on citizens' rights, the money we owe, and the Irish backstop. And that's the only thing resolved if we pass this withdrawal agreement today. And I still can't understand what the objection of the Labour Party is to any of those three.
I engage with that point because it's an important point. I have actually dealt with it a number of times from this dispatch box. I've made it clear on a number of occasions that the Labour Party recognises the need for the backstop. The problem is this, and it's there in the heart of the letter from President Tusk and President Juncker, where they say the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration are part of the same negotiated package, and if anybody's read the legislation that we are voting under tonight, they will appreciate that the government cannot move forward unless both the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration together are voted on tonight. So it's a cheap point for people to simply say, well, since you accept there's a backstop, you should vote for this tonight, and I won't accept it. But Mr. Speaker, it's not just the technical fact that the withdrawal agreement and political declaration have to be voted through together. It's also the fact that what's happened today, and looking at the promises, is as much about trust as it is about substance. Now, I've never doubted the difficulty of the Prime Minister's task, or the way that she has gone around the task that she's had. And she's been right to refuse to listen to those who are casual and complacent about the need to avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland. But the reality is that the deal the Prime Minister has put before this House is deeply flawed. The future relationship document is flimsy and vague. It's an option paper. It's the blindest of Brexit. Now, I heard what the Prime Minister said today, and she said it before, about not being able to negotiate a trade agreement with the EU until we have left, and that is, of course, right. But she knows, and I know, what she promised: a comprehensive and detailed political declaration ready to be implemented. That's why it was called an implementation period and not a transition period. And that was a commitment made at the dispatch box by Brexit secretaries on a number of occasions, a detailed political declaration. This deal is not that. It's an abject failure. It does not protect jobs, living standards or rights. It will not deliver frictionless trade. The deal has already been rejected once by this House. It's been rejected by the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly. It's opposed by the TUC and the entire trade union movement, and every opposition party in the House, and I suspect a good many members opposite, will oppose it tonight. This is a sorry outcome after 2 years of negotiations. I won't, because I've just looked at the clock. Mr. Speaker, I want to end with this. I've been in this role as Shadow Brexit Secretary for 2.5 years. It often feels longer. Many predictions were possible back then, but I could not possibly have foreseen the scale of the calamity now upon us. The truth is, the Prime Minister spent 24 months negotiating the deal, but the deal arrived at is a desperate attempt to keep her divided party together, and it's failed even in that endeavour. And I believe it will be rejected by this House. Now, this is a difficult moment for this House and for the country, and we in this House should take no joy in the events that have unfolded. But after tonight, the House will need to come together and find a way out of the mess that the Prime Minister and this government have created. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State for Brexit, Secretary Stephen